Yeah, so I've been interested to a limited extent in the family tree, maybe through other older cousins that started researching it years ago. But I suppose my interest in more recent years was when my youngest cousin was celebrating her 40th birthday. I was researching the family, initially going up to London to what was then the Family Records Centre, which they set up in the 1990s, I think, as family history research really became popular, and which was a nice day out. But it was, because it wasn't online at the time, you had to go through the old index books, these huge books you had to lift off the shelf and go through to try and find names, either the births or the marriages or deaths of people. And if you wanted to look through the census, you had to go upstairs to look through the microfilm and search that way. So it was quite a fun thing to do, because in the basement there was a little area of tables and chairs where you just take your sandwiches and have a bite to eat and plan your next research in the afternoon. And so greatly built up information that way. You still had to send off for certificates, but you could do a lot of research. But it was just arduous, because you had to go, if you didn't know, if you wanted to search for somebody, you didn't know when they were born, within a 20-year period, you had to go through each book, and one book was a quarter, just 3 months. So you had to go through that laboriously until you found them. But when it went online in the early 2000s, then a lot of that stopped, so the Family Records Centre closed down, and it all became online research, which made things a lot easier. I came across some elderly relatives, one or two I knew vaguely, but others I didn't know at all, and I was able to get in touch with them and go and visit them and talk to them, just learning about their early life, where they came from. So that all adds to the information about the individuals. So it's not just a matter of collecting dates and names, but it's putting more detail in about their lives, where they lived and what jobs they did, and those sorts of things. So it's just interesting. It can be quite addictive, and I still haven't got all the information I'd like to get. So it's interesting when the 1921 census came out last month, to be able to get the household schedule of the census, showing my father's family. My father was an 11-year-old boy then, in the latest census, 1921, living with his parents. So it was interesting to see that. And likewise my mother and her family in 1921. Because you actually see the writing, my grandfather's handwriting. 1901, 20 years ago, was the first one they actually brought out online straight away, and that was because they hadn't got it set up. They didn't expect so many people, and when it was first released, I think the site crashed very quickly, because just too many people came onto it. But they've learnt from that, and 1921 has gone very smoothly. But there won't be any other censuses available to the public for another 30 years. Well, 1931, the next one that would have been due, when that was done, that was destroyed in the war. They happened to be hit by a bomb in the war, and all the records were lost. And 1941, during the war, they never took the census then. So 1951 will be the next one. And because there's a 100-year rule, you can't see it for 100 years after the census. So that's why the 1921 came out beginning of this year. But there is another, what they call a 1939 register, that was taken just before, at the start of the war, which was like a census, not quite as detailed, but the idea of that was to see how many men really were available to fight, of fighting age, and what sort of occupations they had. So it was a census of a sort, but with a specific requirement to give the government an idea when they were preparing for war. But that's quite useful as well. So we have got something in between, which I've got access to as well. So I've got some information from that to see where my parents were in 1939. Well, my father was living at home with his parents in Edmonton. He got married in 1940, so the year after that register was taken. And my mother was living with her parents. But I mean, when I look back at the 1921 census at my grandparents' house, which was even that long ago, they were living at this little house in Albert Street, 2 doors away from where we lived. And you look at their house was identical to ours. It has just three bedrooms, but 3 little rooms. The main bedroom at the front went across the width of the house, but the other 2 rooms were quite small. And my grandparents' house was identical to that. Yet in the 1921 census, there were 10 people living in that house.